Israel's landmark fourth serial election in 2 years quickly approaching.
But ILTV is working hard to make sure that we provide you with the best 2021 elections coverage possible.
So make sure to join us online as we broadcast live on election night, March 23rd at 10 p.m. Israel time. I'm Ladar Gavei-Lazi.
And I'm Aaron Porras. See you then.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lauren Izo. Coming up in this edition, Israel sets up vaccine clinics at West Bank checkpoints for Palestinian workers. Will the country head to a fifth election? That's the question on everyone's mind as the final polls suggest more political deadlock. We'll take a closer look at the Blue and White Party. Israeli and Emirati rugby players compete for the 2021 Friendship Cup. Well, Israel seems to be on the fast road out of this pandemic. This week, the country lifts more of its COVID-19 restrictions, including increasing the number of people allowed at stadium events and removing a cap on the number of Israelis flying into the country each day. It's conveniently happening just in time for a national election. Coincidence? Only the numbers will tell. Chana Rifkin has more.
85 new cases of the novel coronavirus were reported on Saturday, and 1.7% of tests returned positive, according to the Sunday morning update by the Health Ministry. Of those infected, 561 were in serious condition, and 199 were on ventilators. The death toll stood at 6,085. The R number, measuring how many people each virus carrier could infect, dropped to 0.65 on Sunday as well. The percentage of positive daily tests is at the lowest it's been since late November. Meanwhile, over 4.5 million Israelis have been fully vaccinated with both doses of the coronavirus vaccine. In total, 5,184,902 Israelis have received at least the first dose of the vaccination, and 61% of Israelis are at least 2 weeks after their first dose. The Israeli government has approved new regulations on arrival and departures from Ben Gurion Airport. From Saturday at midnight, there are no longer restrictions on the number of people allowed to enter the country. Passengers will no longer be asked to check their temperature while entering the terminal and before boarding. According to the latest regulations, in a confined area with more than 5,000 seats, the number of people inside must not exceed 30% of its capacity, and no more than 3,000 people overall. In a room with less than 5,000 seats, the number of people must not exceed 50% of its capacity and no more than 1,000 people overall. And according to the Prime Minister, Israel seems to be on its way out of the pandemic. Chana Rifkin, ILTV.
Well, as the Palestinian Authority is kicking off its vaccine campaign as well, a new program being organized by Sheba Tel Aviv Medical Center is setting up vaccine clinics at West Bank checkpoints in order to vaccinate Palestinian workers entering Israel. Let's speak to Professor Arnon Afek, Associate Director General of Sheba Medical Center. Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor.
Thank you and good evening.
Good evening to you as well. Now, please start by telling us about the program I mentioned. Who exactly are you vaccinating? Is this for Palestinian workers entering Israel or any Palestinians who wish to get vaccinated?
So right now what Israel has been vaccinating are Palestinians who are passing the borders. They are workers in Israel. And once they pass the border, we'd like to issue them a vaccine that will do two things. First, enhance the safety of the people of Israel because they are among us, they work among us, and we want everyone who is within our borders to be vaccinated. And of course, the fact that they are vaccinated is also very important to the Palestinian authorities as well, as they return there and they'll be protected from the corona. And as you know, probably the Palestinian authorities has started vaccinating today or these days people above the age of 75. So this joins their common effort to provide immunity to the Palestinian people.
Right, so how many have been vaccinated up until now, and what vaccine are you giving to the Palestinian workers that you're vaccinating?
So we are using the Moderna vaccine. The Moderna is a very, very advanced vaccine, not different in the technology than the Pfizer vaccine. The only difference is that the Moderna vaccine is being administered at 4 weeks after the first dose, while the Pfizer it's 3 weeks after the first dose, but it's the same RNA-based technology. Israel has bought some of these vaccines, and the first one we received are used to vaccinate the Palestinian authorities. Our part of the effort, the vaccination of the people at Shar Menashe and Eyal cross border lines are about 20,000 people. So far, they got the first dose, and within 4 weeks, they'll get, of course, the second one.
I wonder who exactly is involved in this initiative. Like behind the scenes, what organizations had to come together to make this happen?
Well, of course, we joined forces first with the government of Israel who issued this vaccine, the Ministry of Health. We have also partners among the border authorities who are controlling the borders and are part of the missions itself. But I think the most important part of it is that we have also Palestinian people with us, both physicians and other representatives of the Palestinian authorities who come join us in the effort and learn from us. So once they'll be back, I'm sure they'll be very fruitful and very helpful in the entire vaccination effort of the Palestinian people.
Do you think that this collaboration could potentially escalate to a situation where Israeli medical organizations are setting up vaccine clinics throughout the West Bank for Palestinians? Is that a possibility?
First, the Palestinians have their own medical authorities and their own Ministry of Health, and they have hospitals. But if they need our help, we are always willing to help. I remind you that at the beginning of the epidemic, once we set at Sheba Medical Center the first Corona department in Israel, and afterwards the first Corona intensive care unit, we had people from the Palestinian authorities arriving to Sheba and learning from us, like the rest of the Israeli hospitals and the rest of the Israeli health fund. So everyone learned together. And afterwards, we even send teams to Jericho to teach and instruct the people in their own places. So medical collaboration continues all the time, and we'll be very willing, and of course, to help the Palestinians in their own effort. But I do believe they'll be able to do that. They are quite organized.
Dr. Afek, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. All the best. All right, moving on now. Will the country head to fifth elections? That's the question on everyone's mind as the final polls conducted before Election Day on Tuesday, all suggesting continued political deadlock. As neither the anti nor the pro-Netanyahu blocs are expected to receive 61 seats in order to form a government. Naftali Bennett's Yamina party, however, which is currently uncommitted to either bloc, could give the anti-Netanyahu parties a coalition. Yesh Atid leader Yair Lapid and Netanyahu's biggest challenger speaking to Ynet this morning in a rare interview, saying it's not so black and white.
אני מסתכלת על הנתונים, ולפחות לפי מה שאנחנו רואים עכשיו, זה נראה או ממשלת נתניהו או מערכת בחירות חמישית.
אני לא יודע על בסיס מה את אומרת את זה. שמעתי את המשפט הזה, הוא פשוט לא נכון. אני אומר, אנחנו עכשיו, יש מולנו דווקא המרחב, אפילו קצת פחות, אפילו עם אלה עם הנתונים הפחות טובים, אומר שיש מלחמה על המנדט ה-61. שם אנחנו נמצאים...
באיזה הרכב של ממשלה?
יש 61 מנדטים, או כמעט. אנחנו ממש על הקסקס מ-61 מנדטים, שאומרים, נתניהו לא יהיה ראש ממשלה במדינת ישראל.
Meanwhile, Public Security Minister Amir Ohana briefly posting a picture on Facebook Friday in which he's seen shooting a target with the, quote, center block written on it 4 days before the March 23rd election. The picture is from an interview that Ohana gave to Israel Hayom newspaper, which is affiliated with Israel's pro-Netanyahu conservative right wing. Ohana deleted the post soon after, saying that he was shooting at a target with terrorists on it, and that the words hinting at his Likud party's political rivals were added later without his knowledge. Meanwhile, the largest gathering of its kind in months, up to 50,000 people demonstrated outside the home of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem over the weekend, calling for an end to his leadership just 3 days before the country's fourth election in 2 years. Well, Gabby Breiner is a journalist and will be doing special coverage for ILTV during our live elections broadcast. Let's talk to her about what to look forward to on Tuesday. Gabby, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be here, Lauren.
So everyone seems to be calling, like I said, Naftali Bennett the kingmaker in this election. What exactly does that mean, and what does he have the power to change in this upcoming vote?
Right. So, Lauren, to answer your question, let's go back a bit and have a look at exactly how the Prime Minister in Israel is chosen. So after the election, the president holds a meeting with all the party leaders and they recommend one person as Prime Minister. It doesn't necessarily have to be the party with the most seats, but it does have to be the majority have to appoint to this leader. So as we've seen, as you said before, we've got an anti-Netanyahu bloc and a pro-Netanyahu bloc. That means that these parties have come out and support or against Netanyahu, which is what they'll plan to do in their meetings with President Rivlin down the track. So Naftali Bennett, where it gets interesting is he actually hasn't identified publicly, at least, whether he'll be siding with Netanyahu or siding with the anti-Netanyahu bloc. And because they're so neck and neck in the polls, he really does seem to have a lot of power leading up to this election.
Do you think it would help him or hurt him if he actually announced before the election who he was supporting?
I think part of the mystery about it all is that he is, keeping his cards close to his chest, keeping everything to himself. So it's really hard to say at this point, Lauren, with 2 days to go, anything is possible.
Okay, let's move on to Yair Lapid. Tell me what is happening in the polls, and is it possible that Lapid is going to get enough mandates in this election to get a chance to try to form a coalition?
Right. So last polls were released last Friday night, and both Channel 12 and Channel 13 polls did suggest that Yair Lapid is going to nab 18 seats, which would make him the second biggest party in the Knesset, but it doesn't necessarily mean he is going to be Prime Minister or will even have a chance of building a big enough coalition that's going to pass the 61 majority. So really, it's so neck and neck in the polls. It's really hard to say. Neither of the polls were actually able to call one bloc having a majority. So it's really, really unknown at this point. Anything is possible. It's so neck and neck. It really could go to anyone at this point.
And there's also, the parties that are getting just a few votes in the latest polls. What we're saying is on the verge of the electoral threshold.
That's right.
What happens if those parties don't make it into the Knesset? Who could they help and who could they hurt?
So we've got three parties that in recent weeks have signalled that they might not actually pass 3.25% electoral threshold, which is equivalent to 4 seats. That's Meretz, which is a left-wing party and would definitely be supporting the anti-Netanyahu bloc. There's Kahol Lavan, which actually is sitting with Netanyahu right now. That's the party headed by Benny Gantz, who initially ran on an anti-Netanyahu campaign, but he actually ended up siding with Netanyahu, and he's gotten both criticism and praise for that move. Now he's down to a situation where he's actually might not cross into the Knesset. And then we've got the United Arab List. That's a breakaway party from the Joint List, and that's headed up by Mansour Abbas. He's come out very, very frustrated with how the Joint List have been boycotting the government, and he actually sees potential in joining the government to actually promote the interests of Arab Israelis in the Knesset.
Right. What's really interesting is that entire transformation that happened to Benny Gantz. Like we're seeing in the polls, he's getting a lot fewer mandates according to the predictions, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Gabby, thank you so much for coming in today. Really appreciate it. Well, once a strong opposer and loud voice against Netanyahu, perhaps the saddest story in this election is that of Benny Gantz. His blue and white party gained momentum as the answer to Israel's political problems until the party dissolved into nearly nothing. The next segment in our Elections 2021 coverage is a look at Benny Gantz and his Kahol Lavan. Blue and White began as a centrist electoral list established in the run-up to the 2019 elections. It included the Israel Resilience Party, Telem, and Yesh Atid. The former two, headed by Benny Gantz and Moshe Ya'alon respectively, were formed in late 2018 and decided to run together. Following intensive efforts, Yesh Atid's leader Yair Lapid also decided to head his party into the list. After 3 elections of trying to beat Netanyahu for the premiership and in the middle of the global COVID-19 pandemic, Last March, Gantz announcing he would consider developing a national emergency government with Netanyahu. He agreed on serving as alternate prime minister, but the country remains skeptical that it would reach that stage before crumbling into another deadlocked election. That led to the party splitting up and Lapid, Ya'alon, and Ashkenazi turning their backs on Gantz. Now, after Gantz and Netanyahu decided to work together, they continue to disagree. And because of that, the country is headed to a fourth election. But since the parties split, Gantz's blue and white has dropped significantly in the polls, leaving little chance he will influence the outcome at all. Blue and white's policies include rescinding laws barring businesses from opening on Shabbat, drafting ultra-Orthodox yeshiva students, approving legislation to allow civil unions and surrogacy for LGBT families, and amending the nation-state law to include equality as a fundamental constitutional principle. The latest polls only giving Gantz's party 4 seats, a far cry from the 33 mandates he received last year. No matter what the result, their influence on policy will be different this time around. Well, we are finally seeing the fruit of the Abraham Accords in more ways than one. Over the weekend, a rugby match for what is being called the Abraham Accords Friendship Cup. Take a look.
The UAE and Israel played a friendly 7-a-side rugby match to compete for the Abraham Accords Friendship Cup, named after the agreement signed between the UAE and Israel last year. The Israeli team beat the Emiratis 33-0 before splitting into a blue team and another white team that involved mixing players from both teams into each. The jerseys for the second match had peace printed on the back in Arabic, English, and Hebrew.
It's the first time ever an Israeli national team is in the United Arab Emirates playing a national Emirati team. But much more than that, you're looking at the field now, you don't see 2 countries. You see 2 teams because each team is composed from players from both countries.
Head of the Emirati Rugby Federation, Mohammed Al Maktoum, said he hopes this would encourage federations from other sports to hold friendly matches with Israeli teams.
يجمع مباراة ودية بين المنتخب الإماراتي والمنتخب الإسرائيلي وهاي طبعا دائما البداية وهاي يعني هي مثل ما تقول الافتتاحية للاتحادات الأخرى إن شاء الله بعد أخواننا وزملائنا كلهم أنهم يختلطون ويلعبون مع المنتخب الإسرائيلي وهاي مباريات ودية راح تصير بالإمارات وبتصير في إسرائيل أيضا وإن دلت على شيء هي تدل على السلام بين الدولتين.
President of Israel's Rugby Union, Ofer Fabian, also said that the inter-squad match sends an important message of peace.
It was important for us and for our counterparts, our friends here in the Emirates, that not only do we play one against each other, but we play with each other. So in each team here, we have players from both teams actually playing together. And this is a true message of peace.
The UAE and Israel normalized ties in a Washington ceremony on September 15, 2020, brought together by shared concern about Iran. The Abraham Accords, which were also joined by Bahrain, have uncorked tourism and commerce between Israel and Gulf Arab countries.
As of today, eye diseases and low vision impairment were approached from a purely optic perspective, treating only the eyes, resulting in partial success only. Revital Vision approaches vision impairments from a full perspective, addressing the brain as well. The company's products address the need of hundreds of millions of people worldwide suffering from different visual impairments and eye disease who until now had no effective alternative solution to improve their condition without surgery, risk, or medication. Yair Yahav is the CEO and founder of Revital Vision, and his former patient, Yarden Naveh, they join us now in studio. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. So I want to start with you, Yair. There are a lot of technologies that are working on improving eyesight. What is unique about your technology, and what makes you so different from everything else out there?
There are several differentiation between our technologies and other technologies out there in the market. The vision depends on both how the image is captured by the optics, by the eye, and the visual processing in the brain. Our technology focuses only on improving brain visual processing. We are using a patented stimulation technique that is able to identify cortical deficits, specific cortical deficit, and provide very effective stimulation to those neurons and provide patient-specific program that works in most humans. We are able to effectively stimulates the brain visual cortex and improves vision. We are the only technology in the world that has FDA approval with efficacy claim to improve vision in adults with amblyopia, which is considered otherwise untreatable until the age of 9. And we are also effective in improving vision in various eye diseases, such as congenital nystagmus, which Yarden will share with you. Congenital nystagmus is a disease where there is constant uncontrollable movement of the eye, which leads to poor vision and many other visual impairments.
So why don't we turn over now to Yarden? It seems like an appropriate time. Why don't you tell me what was the problem that you had when you wanted to get this treatment, and where are you these days? Where are you now?
So I born with a nystagmus, which affect my vision, and all the eye doctors told me that I can't get a driving license. So I tried the program of Revital Vision, and after 3 months, I feel a major. I felt a major improvement. So I go to optometrist, and she told me that I have a big improvement, and I can get a driving license. And now I'm driving 2 years.
Within just 3 months of getting the treatment, you were able to have that much of an improvement that you could go get your driver's license?
Yes.
Wow.
And my dream came true.
Yair, we're really interested to know in what development Revital Vision is. What stage are we in? How can people get this treatment if that's really what they need and they're looking for?
So we have actually completed the product. We started initial sales in worldwide. We have been treated a few hundred patients with our new technology platform. We have completed the regulatory approval for our new technology platform, FDA approval, CE mark. We are also applied for a unique CPT code, treatment code, reimbursement code in the US. And we hope to have it soon. Right now we are fundraising. We are fundraising through PeopleBiz, which is a crowd-funding platform. We are primarily raising funds for the marketing activities. We would like to bring it to the world so every ophthalmologist and optometrist would know about this technology, and of course for the public.
Great. Well, it sounds like a very important innovation. Thank you both for coming in today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, on that note, let's take a look at the weather forecast with Chana Rifkin.
Thanks, Lauren. So we'll be seeing mixtures of clouds and rain throughout the country tonight and tomorrow. Israel tonight calling for lows, expecting a rise into the 60s and 70s, or ranging from the mid-teens to the low 20s in Celsius. And highs tomorrow expecting to range from the mid-70s to a sizzling upper 90s. And highs tomorrow expecting to range from the mid-70s to a sizzling lower 90s, or between 24 to 34 degrees Celsius. Back to the studio now.
Thanks, Chana. And now, just before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. That's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.3 shekels to the American dollar and 2.63 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to visit the all-new and improved ILTV website at iltv.tv and subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates while you're there. I'm Lauren Izzo. Thank you for watching.